the end of Joshua. We're going to be in Joshua 24 for a little bit this morning. Next week we'll be back in 2 Thessalonians. As you turn there to this passage, just as a way of introduction, we really are living in precarious times, are we not? I mean, just unique, weird, strange kind of times. And everybody's got their own answer and solution to the problem. The reality is this: we haven't discovered what the problem is yet. We haven't agreed upon that. And as I truly believe that the problem today is not that we need this policy fixed or we need these people in office. The problem today is sin, and the solution today is the gospel. And I truly believe that with everything within me, and yet we live in such weird times that as a Christian, it's getting more and more unique on what it means to live for Jesus in a culture that does not. Would you agree with me? I think it is just remarkably odd and very frustrating that I feel like as a father of young children, I can't just turn on a football game and watch it with my kids for fear of what the Hardee's commercial is going to be. I'm frustrated that is celebrated, that is put out there as a joke, and yet the moment that someone begins to give God credit for a win, just all of a sudden we have a technical malfunction. Isn't that just odd? I mean, some of y'all watched the game last night, right? Sure, it was a mistake. It was an accident, yeah. I just wish that some of those accidents would happen on those commercials, you know? Or maybe we wouldn't celebrate those in athletics that are getting arrested or doing all these other things. When someone gives credit to God, then all of a sudden maybe we shouldn't just take it out. But these are the times that we live in. It's just getting more and more unique to try to follow Christ in times when a culture does not. I'll give you another example. This week we had a group come in to our staff meeting to explain to us, just to make sure that what we were doing is correct. We asked them here. They've asked if we could help out, and what they want to help out in is an area of child abuse and sexual abuse in this community and how we can be a voice and help out in that. And I started asking questions about what does it mean to be as a mandated reporter. Because there's a lot of pastors in our area that think, well, if somebody comes and talks to me in a counseling situation, I don't have to report that, right? That's incorrect. In fact, I learned this. I read a document this week. This blew my mind. Did you know that as a clergy, as a pastor, if I find out that there is a woman who is pregnant and she is drinking alcohol or doing any types of substance abuse, if I don't report that to the police or DSS, I can be fined and imprisoned for up to 6 months. And it's interesting the wording that you read it. It says, for this purpose of alcohol abuse or substance abuse, we will refer to the fetus as a child. And I can be in prison for 6 months for refusing to say this woman is drinking alcohol and this child is in danger of fetal alcohol syndrome. But when it comes to that God has stamped his image upon a child within the womb, if I open my mouth, culture is saying, shut your mouth. We don't want to hear it. But yet for this purpose, I would be fined and imprisoned. But yet to stand up and believe that at conception a child is a life that deserves protection, shut your mouth, pastor. It's not your job to speak up here. Isn't that odd to you? We're living in times where everybody is saying, you know what? If we would just fix this gun law, if we could get this racial reconciliation thing going on here, if we could just get the House and the Senate to agree upon this in the marriage, if we could just get the Supreme Court over here, like everybody's saying, if just this will fall or this will happen, then we'll be okay. And my question to you is this morning. How often in this book do you see that the people of God were following and under the authority of godly leaders? How often? Let's look at Egypt, because the people of God were in Egypt, right? And they served Pharaoh, who said, hey, everybody, you want to do your quiet time? No. What did Pharaoh? Pharaoh was anti them following the Lord. And so the people of God had to learn how to live for God in a culture that did not. You follow me? And then all of a sudden they go into own land and they get land and they have places where they can live and set up shop. And then all of a sudden they'd have a king sometimes that would follow the Lord, but most often you'd find a king that was of God's people that were also following other gods. And the people of God had to learn how to live for God in a culture who did not. Then all of a sudden they get exiled to places like Babylon. And they say, if you don't bow down to the king here, you're going to jail. If you don't worship the king here, we're going to burn you alive. And people like Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego said, we are going to live for God among a culture that does not. And then all of a sudden we come to Jesus, right? Because Jesus lived in a culture that was all very favorable to his way of life, wasn't it? No. He had every institution you can name trying to silence him, stop him, and he taught us how to live in a culture that does not fear the Lord. And the disciples, the rest of Acts, all the epistles, the Bible, they are living under the rule and the reign of kings who do not follow Jesus. And so I go, well, Jesus, if the answer is getting the right political people in office, why didn't you just run for president, run for king while you're here? Because the realization is this: Jesus did not come to run for office. He came to run to the cross. There is a sense in which we want to just fix the system and then everything's going to fall in place. Reason why schools are so messed up? Well, they took out prayer. Can they really do that? You can't pray? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You can't. They didn't take anything out. They're not going to change who you are. People of God are still going to rise up and do what the people of God do, even if the culture does not. And here's why I say this, and I'm going to be real careful here. If you believe that our country can be fixed if we get the right president in office and for the Senate and the House to make bills the way that you think, we're in trouble. Major trouble. I mean, I know you might have a candidate out there you like, but y'all, this is depressing. At some level. You sit there and go, okay, so they're going to fix everything, right? No, they can't. But what we want to do is, let's get the White House fixed. You might think it's broken, you might think it's great, but if we could just get the White House fixed, then the country will be set. So let's get so passionate about getting that right person in that position, because obviously then we can live for Jesus, right? Or maybe not the White House, but the State House. Okay, well, maybe the country's going to be doing this, but if we can keep the state doing this, we'll be fine. Let's keep the State House and our policies and our procedures. Let's glorify God. We'll get the right people in place in the State House and it'll be fine. And that's not exactly true either. Then we go, well, maybe if everything's messed up, as long as everything's fine in the church house, we'll be all right, right? Guess what? Denominations and churches are dropping like flies today from following what the Lord is. They're dropping. So even there, so we can focus our time on the White House, the State House, or the church house, but what God in His Word is commanding us to do is to look at our house. No matter what happens out there, we've got to learn how we're going to live for the Lord if nobody else does. Because I can promise you this. You think it's bad now? It can get worse. You sort of feel it drifting worse, don't you? But I am here to tell you today, I'm not scared. I'm not alarmed. Because I want to stand up like Joshua and say, no matter what everybody else does, as for me and my house, I know what we're going to do. We're going to serve the Lord. So as we look in Joshua chapter 24, verse number 1, Joshua is going to bring all of the people of God together. Let's read this verse. We're going to look at a few others. It says, Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and summoned the elders, the heads, the judges, and the officers of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. So you go, well, I really don't know that much about Shechem. What's going on here? Let me explain something. So you remember Moses had been leading the people of God. He led them out of Egypt, right? They were going towards the promised land. How long did it take them to get to the promised land? 40 years, okay? They're wandering in the wilderness. Why were they wandering in the wilderness? Because they would not obey God. They were struggling with obeying God, and so they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. They finally can see the promised land in the distance, and Moses goes, oh, finally, Lord, I can do it. And God says, and you're not going to be able to take them over there because you've got a lot of sin in your life, and so you're just going to die here. And he goes, for real? And he goes, yeah, and he dies, and God buries him. Deuteronomy 34, it's an incredible story. Read it sometime. And it has this moment, and then all of a sudden, in Joshua chapter 1, God sees the people of God. It says they've been mourning Moses for 40 days and 40 nights. And then God speaks to Joshua. Joshua, yes, sir. Moses, my servant, is dead. He's not coming back. So get up and lead the people now. I'll let you mourn, but now it's time for you to lead the people. And so Joshua, it's not really this spiritual kind of priest or prophet like Moses was. He's a military guy. Well, guess what the people of God need right now? They need a military guy. And so for all of these years, they're sitting here and they are winning these battles, and they're seeing how God is bringing all these things together. And so Joshua leads the people as a military commander. It kind of looks like this, okay? No other military commander probably in their history has this type of war stories. It would sound something like this. Hey guys, so here's the plan. Gather all the leaders and all the officials all together and says, what we're going to do is we're going to go take Jericho tomorrow. All right? How are we going to take Jericho? I need the brass section and the marching band. You guys come up here first. And what? Well, you're going to be in front of the army. No, they didn't train me for this at band camp. No, sir. And no. You're going to lead the army. And what's going to happen is all the soldiers will be behind you, and you guys are just going to march around the city. And they're like, do what? Hit them with our trumpets? And they're like, no, just hold them for a little bit. Walk around for 7 days. And on the seventh day, you're going to walk around it, and then you're going to blast the trumpets. The walls are going to come down, and we're going to take the land. And guess what? The people did it. Joshua's the commander. Yes, sir. Crazy Joshua. I hope this works. Please. Can you imagine? But they followed in line with him. And so they had these moments where they followed him. And they'd say stuff like, hey, what are we going to do, Joshua? Well, we're going to pray that the Lord's going to make the sun stand still so the day will go on longer and we can defeat the battle. And God would do it. And so for up these points that he's been this military commander and everybody has stepped in line, and now they've got the land. Everything's good. Like they're finally there. No more battles, no more wars. It's time to build homes, build families, and just be able to settle down and enjoy the promise of God. And so he gathers them at Shechem. And it's very interesting. I go, well, I don't know that much about Shechem. Let me tell you something. There was a guy who was called into the ministry, if you speak, by the name of Abraham. And guess where he was called? At Shechem. In Genesis chapter 12, it says, Abraham, I'm going to bless you. For what purpose? So that you will bless all the families of all the nations of the earth. Normally people say, oh, Abraham was blessed to be a blessing to all the nations. It's interesting what he says. I'm blessing you so that you'll bless all the families of all the nations of the earth. Somebody's going to come from your family that's going to bless every other family, and all this. There's going to be a promise here. And so I'm sending you out from this place because you're going to have somebody from your family that's going to bless all the families of the nations of the earth. Abraham is called there at Shechem. The next interesting thing that happens, that's Genesis 12. And Genesis 35, Jacob, who's renamed to Israel, is on his journey, and God calls out to him and says, Jacob, he says, yes, sir, I want you to put away all the foreign gods that are still among you and your people. I know that you don't think I know that they're there, but I'm aware they're there, and you got to leave them here. If you're going to continue on following me, they leave now. What do you want me to do? Get this. In Genesis 35, they dig a big old hole in Shechem, and they throw all their gods there, and they bury them there. And they cover up with dirt. And so Joshua aligns all the people after all these battles have been won, and he says, come to me at this place. And they go, ooh, isn't that like a graveyard of the gods? He goes, yep. Come to me at this spot where these gods have been buried, and some of you are still trying to resurrect them. They were buried here, and so I want you to come here at Shechem. And he brings them together, and then verse 2, this is what he says. And Joshua said to all the people, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. So he speaks on behalf of God. Here's what he says. He takes a little trip down memory lane. This is great. Long ago, your fathers lived beyond the Euphrates. Terah, the father of Abraham of Nahor, and they served other gods. Then listen to the personal, first-person way that God is going to attribute what happens next. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and made his offspring many. I gave him Isaac. And to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. And I gave Esau the hill country of Seir to possess. But Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. And I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with what I did in the midst of it. And afterward, I brought you out. You think God's trying to, make them understand something here? The reason you're here today, I did it. The reason you're still alive today, because I did it. He keeps going. Verse 6, then I brought your fathers out of Egypt, and you came to the Red Sea. And the Egyptians pursued your fathers with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. And when they cried to the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians and made the sea come upon them and cover them. And your eyes saw what I did in Egypt. And you lived in the wilderness a long time. Then I brought you to the land of the Amorites, who lived on the other side of the Jordan. They fought with you, and I gave them into your hand. And you took possession of their land, and I destroyed them before you. Then Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, arose and fought against Israel. And he sent and invited Balaam, the son of Beor, to curse you. But I would not listen to Balaam. Indeed, he blessed you. So I delivered you out of his hand. And you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho. And the leaders of Jericho fought against you. And also the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, Hivites, and the Jebusites. By the way, those are the passages that cause many people not to want to read aloud in public in the Bible. It's okay. Go fast. Nobody knows the difference. And I gave them into your hand. And I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out before you, the 2 kings of the Amorites. It was not by your sword or by your bow. I gave you a land on which you had not labored, and cities that you had not built, and you dwell in them. You eat the fruit of vineyards and olive orchards that you did not plant. So before he asks them to do anything, he just reminds them, look at what I've already done. If you are failing to remember, look at what I have already done. You know, there's a lot of times that I'll be asking God to do certain things, and I need to remind myself on the regular this fact, that God doesn't owe me anything. Anything. I've got more than what I deserved in the first place. If I never get another thing from his hand, I'm still spoiled rotten. I have things in my lap that I did not plant, I did not build, and he has given me. And in fact, if I don't even have all this stuff, which I've got this stuff, I have him. And yet beyond him, I have a relationship with him in that he saved me and he bought me and he adopted me and made me his own. And then he does stuff like this. He's kept me alive today. You got here today while some people can't get out of their house today. You ate yesterday. You're wearing clothes. You're taken care of. Things are okay, and you've got all of these things. You've got a church that prizes Jesus above all else, and like you have these things, and I want to say congratulations, that's a good thing. And God is reminding Joshua, and I think he needs to remind us that he doesn't owe us anything, and we don't need to really be saying, yeah, well, I'd follow you if only this. I would say this. He's done plenty for each and every one of us. So then this is what he says, as he reminds them that every victorious battle was due to God's intervention and not the Israelites' strength. As he reminds them of this, then in verse 14 he says this, all right? Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and faithfulness. Let me just stop there. He goes, okay, so you remember all that? This is what you need to do. Fear the Lord. I think we're supposed to fear the Lord. No, there's a respectful fear, a reverent fear of the one who kept me. Is also, it's sort of like when your parent used to say, I brought you into this world and I can take you out of it. There's a fear there. It can be a healthy fear. That's what God is saying. Like, look, I'm God, you're not. It's okay to fear him. That's a good thing. It's a good thing for a child to have a healthy fear of a parent. I know they love me, but I don't want to cross them. Well, that's God saying, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and faithfulness. Both of them are important. Sincere is almost your motivation. You're not doing it out of obligation. You're doing it because you want to. Not out of obligation, but admiration. Oh, I want to serve you. It's a joy. I'm sincere about it. But then faithfulness, you keep doing it and you stay faithful. I know a lot of people with a lot of sincere thoughts that don't do anything. And I know a lot of people who stay really busy at the Lord's work and their heart's not in it. And Joshua is saying, no. God is speaking and saying, serve God in sincerity and faithfulness. And then he says this, put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And I go, wait a minute, but I thought they had buried them at this spot, Joshua. What are you talking about? They kept lingering on, holding on to those old gods. They wouldn't get rid of them. They continued to go back to them. They continued to dig them back up and start trying to worship other things. So he says, put them away. Verse 15. And if it's evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And you see what he's saying in this moment? He said, look, you remember those gods that you worshiped when you were over in Egypt? Yep, put those away. You remember those gods that you picked up along the path to here? Yep, put those away. You know those gods that they worship in this land that we're inhabiting now, the culture is following? Put those away too. And he's saying, remove all of them from you. And he's not making a threat here. He's offering them a choice. Here's what I'm saying. You can either follow them if it's evil in your sight to follow the Lord, but I'm saying this. As for me and my house, this is what we're going to do. And this is what's so huge. At this point, Joshua can't make the command for everybody anymore. Up to this point, he always has. Invade Jericho. Yes, sir. We're going to wait here for the sun to stand still. Yes, sir. We're going to do this. At this point, he takes off that military commander hat and says, I'm no longer commander. I can't make the decision for the nation anymore, but I can make it for my house. No matter what you guys go out there and do, I've done everything I could to set you up for success to follow the Lord. No matter what you do, I know this. As for me, personally, what I'm going to do and what my house is going to do and what I can control and put my hands on, we're going to serve the one true God no matter what else anybody else does. So he looks at these people and you think, what kind of response is he looking for? The next response that he gets, this is the dream response of any preacher out there. You ready? Verse 16, then the people answered, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight and preserved us in all the way that we went and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore, we will also serve the Lord, for he is our God. And they got it. Can you imagine Joshua going like he's drawing a line in the sand going, all right, who's here? And everybody steps over it. This is a preacher's dream, okay? Takes off the military hat, puts on the preacher role going, you might want to follow all those gods that you picked up along the way. You might want to follow all those gods that the culture around you is doing. But I'm telling you this, you need to choose today. But as for me and my house, this is what we're going to do. And everybody goes, me too, Joshua. I'm in. I mean, everybody's like, let's make a T-shirt. Let's get a bumper sticker. Let's sign a little thing. We're in, God. We're completely, Joshua, we're with you. And so you would think, let's just imagine today. I set up a little invitation, and I get really passionate. I get really emotional. I'm saying, hey, we're drawing a line and saying, who's here with me? And all of you guys stand up and say, as for me and my house, man, we're going to serve the Lord. And you march down here, and this is what I do next. Go sit back down. You do not mean this. Can you imagine? I'd be like, hold on, everybody stay here. Let's take a good group picture. We see everybody's down here at the altar, okay? There's nobody left. Nobody's left. Everybody's down here. Let's take it. This is incredible. And what Joshua does next is one of the most shocking things that you see in the Bible because all these people are committing, and he says, you don't mean it. Just go back to your seat and go home. Look what he says next. Verse 19, but Joshua said to the people, you are not able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. And he is a jealous God. Wait a minute, I thought jealousy was a bad thing. Not if God has it. Okay, let me ask you this. If I see some guy talking to my wife and flirting with my wife, is jealousy an okay thing to have in that moment? Yeah, because she's mine. Don't you even look at her. Don't even breathe around her, boy. I will hunt you down. I will come at you with all the fires that I can come muster up with. I mean, like, you will be fearful for your life. Why? Because she's mine. She doesn't have another. So jealousy in that sense is a good thing. I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, you talk to somebody. I'm saying like, no, she's in a relationship with me. There is nobody else. That's what God's saying. You're mine. Yes. And so Joshua says, you can't, the commitment you just made, just go back to your seats. You don't mean it. Why? Because God's a jealous God and you've been running around with other gods. You say you're committed and you're married to him, but I know what you're doing on the weekends. You're not committed to him. So just go back. Just put up. And he says, he's a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve these foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good. Well, there's a way to, increase the morale of the troops. You don't mean it. You can't follow him, not the level that he's wanting you to follow. Then the people said to Joshua, no, but we will serve the Lord. Then Joshua said to the people, you are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord to serve him. And they said, we are witnesses. He said, and then he literally quotes from Genesis 35:2, where Jacob buries the gods at this spot. Then put away the foreign gods that are among you, and incline your heart to the Lord, the God of Israel. And the people said to Joshua, the Lord our God we will serve, and his voice we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and put in place statutes and rules for them at Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God. And he took a large stone and set it up there under the terebinth that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said to all the people, behold, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord that he spoke to us. Therefore it shall be a witness against you, lest you deal falsely with your God. So Joshua sent the people away, every man to his inheritance. And so as this story comes to a conclusion, it's very interesting what happens as Joshua basically says, this is what my family's going to do regardless of what you do. And they all say, we're in. And he goes, you don't understand what I'm talking about here. And they go, no, we really do mean this. And he says, well, then it's time for you to put away those foreign gods that you've been serving. And so what Joshua does in this moment is he says, you've got to get rid of those things that are rivaling for God's affection and attention. Now, in Joshua's day, it's real easy to determine what was a god and what was not. It was a lot of times a big shiny object on the mantle. You knew, okay, that's I see that, and you're following a god. While it may not be as obvious today, are there gods in the homes of America today other than Jesus Christ? They're there, right? Y'all do see that. I started coming up with a list of them. I really did. I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to give here are the top 10 gods. And I was like, I don't need to go there. This is the way I'm going to handle it. What is it that has your utmost attention and affection? What is it that drives you throughout the day? What is it that causes you to wake up early in the morning dreaming about? Keeps you awake at night as you just can't seem to lie down because it's still on your heart. What is that thing that you would do anything for? What is that person you are craving to get the approval of, and everything about the way that you talk, the way that you act, the way that you dress, you do so they will notice? Quite possibly, that thing could be a god. And it could be a good thing, just in the wrong place. Following me? I know people who are following after gods that it's not a sinful thing, but it's in a wrong priority. It is completely got in the wrong position. I told you I wasn't going to give you all these examples, and I'm not going to, but I want to tell you a story, just a situation that happened a few years ago. I teach some religion courses at Lander University, so I know some of the students. A lot of students I don't know. I had one young man in my class years ago who came up to me after class and said, is there any way that I can come and talk to you? I said, sure. That'd be great. I said, and he's like, where's your office? I said, I don't have one here, so you can come by the church and meet me if you want to. He said, oh, great. And I told him, I said, why not 2 o'clock? So our class was in the morning, and so he's dressed in sweatpants and T-shirt. He's got his ball cap on backwards, this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden at 2 o'clock, they say, hey, your 2 o'clock's here, and I go down the hall, and I see this guy, and he's wearing a tie, nice shirt, nice pants, and I thought, what in the world? Like, I've never seen him dress up in anything other than sweatpants. And I was like, you got like a job interview or something? He's like, no. I said, why are you so dressed up? A couple hours ago, you weren't dressed up like this. He goes, Granddaddy always said, if you go to church, you got to wear your best. I went, okay, all right. And I said, well, that's fine. I'd accept your sweatpants. I just think it's kind of funny. And so as we're sitting down, I start asking him some questions. So what's going on? And he's telling me about some stuff going on in his life. And I said, well, tell me about what you believe about God. Do you have a relationship with God? Would you say that? And then he said, I think I used to. I said, okay, all right, let's unpack that a little bit. What do you mean? And he said, when I was younger, my family, we always went to church. You know, we went to church, we were involved, I went to Sunday school and this kind of stuff. He said, but then we stopped. And he said, so I really haven't had, I guess, a relationship with God or really thought about God or really going to church since then. And I said, well, what happened to you to stop your relationship with God or going to the church? And these are his words to me. I was way too good at baseball. And I said, no, the question was, like, why did you stop coming to church? And he said, because I was way too good at baseball. And for me to succeed in the track that I wanted to succeed in meant that me and my family completely changed our schedules so I could be on this traveling club and this team right here and be able to do that. And that dictated the next 10 years of my life. And he said, and I was really good until I got hurt. I couldn't play anymore. And I said, and so up to this point, he said, well, I just didn't have time for that. Now, before any of you walk out or go ahead and start composing an email to me, I'm not saying baseball is evil. I'm not saying any sport is evil. I'm saying anything that takes the priority position of Jesus Christ is, though. Following me? And it is a tricky balance. In every area, as parents, we are trying to instill and see our children succeed in this American dream situation. And if they're going to be here, they got to be a part of this. And then they got to make sure they get that. And they got to do that. And everything starts focusing in on making sure this can happen. And all of a sudden, this stuff gets snuffed out. And then all of a sudden, you get to a guy who, that God is no longer even an option for me. And he looks at me and going, I'm struggling in life right now. What do I do? Now, just for safety reasons and just so you make sure you understand what I'm saying and what I'm not saying, I'm not saying that hobbies, sports, athletics, any of that stuff is evil. But if I were to ask, let's just say that we had someone from another country come and join us this weekend. They were staying at my house, and they watched last night's football game, and they watched today's service here. What would they assume is the greatest allegiance of our lives? Look, I love college football. It is a great hobby, but it is a pathetic God. Pathetic. I love watching it. I got no problem with people who would stand out in the rain all day for it. I had no problem for people who would go and get in line 10 hours to tailgate and be completely soaked that today they are still wet. No problem there. But what causes concern is that when we can be 10 hours early for a game and 10 minutes late to church. I'm not saying you are. I'm not saying you aren't. I'm saying now's the time to do some introspection, to ask some questions. I know this. If I go over today, some of y'all are going to start looking at your clock saying, we got to go. If last night's game would have gone overtime, we'd have stayed. It'd been exciting. And I'm not saying all those things are bad or evil, but sometimes I just wonder what would happen in this church if the type of dedication we gave to a college football team we gave to what happens here. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that today I get here at about 7 o'clock so I can go over the message for today and try to really get all my thoughts together this morning, and I got here and we have leaks everywhere. I mean, water's floating. We got little inner tubes in the back hallway right now. So, I mean, it's one of those days I'm like, don't really have a lot of time to work on this. We're just going to go there. Could you imagine, like, we get here, and there's just a group of people that are, like, here early, like, praying that the Lord would come and speak to us today. That people are not like, oh, I'm rushing in to get late. Like, I can't wait to be here and be a part of it. Like, could you imagine if the people in this church, if we worked on the spiritual disciplines of Bible study and prayer and fasting and evangelism and giving, if we worked at that kind of level, at the way that some of us would work out? Can you imagine what would happen? Can you imagine, like, the focus and the energy and what could, like, be done if we would just give to the Lord what we give to other stuff? And I'm not saying giving it to the other stuff is bad, but I'm saying be very, very, very careful. It may not be shining on your mantle, but it may be grabbing your heart and leading you. And so, just to finish, I want to give you 3 application points from Joshua's story, and then we're going to be done. Number 1 is this: the only appropriate response to God is unwavering allegiance. I'll say that again. The only appropriate response to God is unwavering allegiance. God says, Joshua, this is what I've done. You see all this? Joshua, this is what I've taken care of. Joshua, you see what I've done? Yes, sir. Then you fear me and you serve me all the days of your life. And this type of deal, this covenant, back in these days, it used to be a covenant with a king, and the people would look like this. The king would say, all right, I'll protect you and provide for you if you'll do this. This covenant sounds a lot like that, except for this fact. God's not promising anything else. He said, I've already done it. I've already done it. I've already served you. I've already taken care of you. I've already been there for you. So now is your opportunity for what? For unwavering allegiance. That you say, I'm going to put everything that I can into following and serving the Lord. Number 2 is this. To help remove the gods from your heart, you might need to remove them from your presence. To help remove the gods from your heart, you might need to remove them from your presence. It was not enough for Joshua to look at the people and say, stop serving those gods. He said, put them away and bury them. Get rid of them. And some of you need to really start sweeping through the house and thinking, is there something that we need to physically remove from the premises? Because it's got our heart. Maybe it's not that easy, but maybe for some of us it is. It's got our hearts, but also it's got our attention. And sometimes we need to say it's time to bury that thing, and it's not an option anymore. Because we know that the weakness of our hearts and that the heart is desperately sick. And sometimes we need to remove that God from our even presence so that it doesn't keep rivaling for our affections. And number 3 is this. You cannot make the decision for the nation, but you can make it for your family. You cannot make the decision for the nation, but you can make it for your family. I used to get stressed out about stuff going on in our country. I used to get stressed out about stuff in the world. I'll still get angry sometimes at certain things. But it's hard for me to lose sleep when I know the one who holds this world in his hands. That no matter what happens in this country, in this culture, or in this world, I know who still has the whole world in his hands. I know the one who still has me in his hands. And so I'm not going to get all riled up about who's this or who's that or do we have this. I honestly believe that really this breakdown in the family that you see, that the war for the land was over in Joshua's situation, but the war for the family was just beginning. I believe that the war on the family is happening right now in our culture. And Joshua knew he could not be leading the masses, but he knew this. The masses weren't going to lead him either. And so you've got to get to a place that I don't care what the popular opinion is. I don't care what the leadership says, what the authority says. As for me and my house, this is what we're going to do. Regardless of how culture changes and the ebb and flow, and depending upon if this person's in office or this policy is passed, regardless, as for me, what I'm going to do, and as for my house, we're going to serve the Lord faithfully. No matter what comes our way, no matter what stipulations they put on us, we will serve the Lord. So whether we are in a situation at which, and goodness gracious, I wish with all my heart that we would really, as a nation, cherish life. That we would cherish life at such a level that laws would be passed and it would be illegal for little babies made in the image of God to be aborted. I pray for that to happen. But if that doesn't happen, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord and we will cherish children, no matter what happens out there. You know, one of the biggest ways to combat that mentality in our culture is if the church would stop talking about children as if they're a burden. That might help. That we would say, these are blessings, these are gifts. They're not, oh man, our hands are full. Oh, they keep us busy, man. We're so thankful. We thought we were pregnant, but we found out we're not. Woo! I mean, we tell that to a world and it seems like a burden. And why in the world do we think it's so weird for a culture to say that it seems like a burden? If it is a mist in the church, it's a fog out there. If it's a mist in the church, it's a fog out there and people cannot see their way. And so I would love for a policy to change. I would love for certain leaders to be elected to change things. But even if they don't, as for me, as for my house, this is what we're going to do. We are going to expend our lives, our resources, our time, our affection on making Jesus famous. On making him seem glorious in our lives and in our home in such a way when the culture goes, I can't believe y'all still believe that way about marriage. I still can't believe you think that way about children. I still can't believe you think that way. And we say, because if we stand on nothing, we stand on the Word of God. And we will keep standing fast because I know that even while the situation may get worse before it gets better, and I do believe that's going to happen, I know this. Greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. And if God is for us, then who can stand against us? He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him over to us all, how will he not also freely with him give us all things? And so with Jesus not running for office, but running to the cross, and that is what we are called to do. To learn how to live for Jesus in a culture that does not. And it does not start in the White House, the State House, or even the church house. It starts in yours. It starts in your house. It starts in my house. And what are we going to do to make the Lord the centerpiece of what we do? So what I want to ask is today, just as we conclude, I'm going to ask that on one end, I would love for some of you to commit that the next 4 days will be a time where you focus on what it really means to live this out. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Because we're going to give you some stuff over the next few days that you go, I didn't even know the Bible said that about marriage. I didn't even know the Bible said that about raising kids. I wasn't even sure. Like, we're going to give you that stuff. And so it's not going to be about information. It's going to be about application. We'll handle the information part, but application. I would love for as often as you can come, in the morning, at noon, and in the evening, to come with us, because this is not something we're trying to do to, this would be great to get these many people in here. We are trying to equip you to do the work of the ministry within your home. But I am praying that today that you would begin to have the conversation with the Lord and say, God, are there any gods in my home, in my life, that are rivaling for the affection that you and you only deserve? So what I want to invite us to do is, why don't we stand to our feet? We're going to sing Joshua 24 together as a family. But what I want to do is I want us to have a time of invitation, a time of prayer, where we can come together as a family. And for some of you right now, some of you are saying, well, I'm not even married, I don't have kids yet. Well, now's the time to really start making sure there's no gods in your life, because guess what? There's some people that would love to get married to you. They got plenty of them, okay? Like, this is a time where you say, as for me and my one-day house, we're going to serve the Lord. And for some of you right now, maybe a good time where you get with your spouse, your family. Maybe you come down to the altar and pray. Maybe you stay where you are and you pray, whatever it is. But just say, Lord, over the next 4 days, even over today, if I can't even come to all this other stuff, will you show and reveal your heart to me on if we did family your way? I honestly believe this. The evangelization and discipleship of the world is going to happen at a better level if the homes in this place are strengthened. With every bit of my heart, I believe that. So what I'm going to ask is that as we respond, I'm going to come down here. I'll pray with anybody who would like to have somebody to pray with. If you want to pray with your family where you are, come down to the altar. Whatever it is, I'm just asking that today that you would ask this question. Say, Lord, is there a God that has slipped in and I haven't gotten him out yet? And maybe you need to put Jesus back at the right place of your home. Now would be a good time to do that. So as we pray, as we respond, I pray that the Lord would speak and you would respond.